Hey everybody, welcome to Book of Catherine, and we are going to talk about what the Clean the GOP is. What is the Clean the GOP movement? And that's kind of hard to do a little bit if you are totally new to the movement. I'm going to try my best to do for you. Basically, the Clean the GOP movement is this. No matter what party that you're in, if you're a Democrat or if you are a Republican or if you're moderate, here's something that most people don't know. Most people, it's kind of kept from us today, but most people don't know this. Only 20% of the population calls themselves like a liberal, like over here. And then 20% of the population calls themselves like a conservative. The other 60% of the population is what's called a moderate. They're in the middle because they have policies and beliefs that are like in both camps. They don't really fit into either party. So what happens is they're kind of lost out there. There's not really any place for them. And so they're seeing this like battle between the two, and they're just like, but there's no place for me. And so I was an independent. I've been an independent for forever, but something's changed. Something dramatic has changed. And I've discovered that over the last 6 months. Something really changed for me. I wasn't interested in politics at all. I figured out a number of years ago that information wasn't really trustworthy. Like the media had really changed. They had changed from reporting the news to just kind of like getting all emotional. It was always screaming on TV, and that turned me off, and I wasn't interested in it anymore. I just was like, nothing seemed to be trustworthy anymore. I didn't understand. Everyone seemed to have a political view and was trying to push that political view. I was interested in being presented facts and making my own decisions. And I was like, well, no one's doing that for us anymore. And that hasn't been done in a really, really long time. And I honestly don't know when that's been done. You look more and more through history, and it seems like there's always been some kind of thing, twisting things behind the scenes. But there definitely was an ability to get facts much, much more. Like you were able to get studies and research at least accessible about 25 years ago in a much greater way. You could go to a library and get facts and data and research. You cannot do that anymore. And I'll explain to you why in a second. So what Clean the GOP is basically about 6 months ago, I started finding out some things because I'm sick in bed. I don't have anything else to do. I'm kind of trapped in the house, though that's changing. Had some procedures lately, so I'm starting to walk again. That's why you hear me say I'm trying to drive. I'm trying to, my procedure got me more mobility. I'm trying to get out and push my mobility and through physical therapy and things like that. So through my research, I started to find out some of the real things that were going on underneath the media, even the conservative media, getting underneath that and finding out some of the things that we weren't being told by either side. And so what happened is I learned that first, I learned all the things that the Democratic Party said, and then what they actually did. So there's the things that the liberals say that they believe in, and then there's what the party was actually doing on paper. And that was really, really big shock for me. So because most of my friends were liberal at the time, most of my friends at the time 6 months ago were Hollywood. It's grown quite a bit since then into a number of other industries. And I had other industries back then, but now it's definitely grown. But boy, like what they're actually doing on paper, like they say they campaign on a bunch of things, but then what they actually pass in law is completely different. And that was a real shock. Like most liberals would say they believe in free speech. Like that used to be the 60s and free speech and everything like that. But if you go on college campuses, like the kids are burning signs that say free speech. You would know that most kids, they're liberal campuses, but they're teaching the kids that free speech is a form of oppression. And the kids are actually, you'll see it online, they're burning signs of free speech. And you think, well, maybe that's just college campuses. No. Hillary Clinton, Al Franken, Nancy Pelosi, they're all, like Chuck Schumer, they're all sponsoring bills to actually limit free speech, put actual bans on free speech and limit free speech, which would kill the First Amendment. Now, I don't know if you know this, but we're the only country that actually has a First Amendment. We're the only country that offers free speech. No other country offers it in the world. So if our free speech goes down, That's a big loss for the rest of the world. We're the only one, and we've had it for 250 years. Other countries could have adopted it. Other countries, and you're thinking to yourself, well, no, like Canada has free speech. Actually, no. No, they don't. In fact, they actually just put in some what you would call hate speech laws. And I know that you think that hate speech laws sound like a great thing, except that it is by law mandated that you have to call people certain things or else you can go to jail and you get fines. And here's the thing is that who decides whether or not you called that person that thing on purpose, whether or not it was a mistake, whether or not it was an accident. And you'll even talk to students on campus. You'll see conversation with them when you do like Change My Minds. And the kids will actually say, well, that doesn't make sense. Like they surely did it on mistake. Like, they're not going to put people in jail for making a mistake. Well, what if it's a political opponent and they did it on mistake? Will they put them in jail then? Yes. Will they look for instances? You have to remember that it is free speech when you take in hate speech laws. It is an amazing political weapon. And once you break that barrier, and what they put a hate speech law in was for using transgenderism. Right now in New York, liberal New York, if you are in a restaurant and if you are a waiter and you wait on a transgender person and you use the wrong pronoun for them, even on accident, the actual restaurant can be fined $250,000. So we are actually making it a law that a waiter cannot use whatever speech that they want to use. And the thing is that most waiters are not looking to actually, we're a pretty tolerant society. There's not a lot of people out there being I'm looking to use this word. The problem is that there's 26 pronouns and the pronouns are constantly changing. It's very easy to get it wrong. And that's $250,000 fine. And the thing is that if the city is tax happy, which they are, it's easy to put small businesses out of business. And the thing is that big corporations love it because it means their businesses. If you're wondering why in New York all the little bodegas have disappeared, this is how it's done. So you have to remember, this is a big thing. America is the only place with free speech, and it's not the conservative, it's not the Republicans who are putting, limits on free speech and these things and these huge fines. It's actually, the people who used to love free speech. The Democrats have changed their party. But it's not just that. It's not just that alone. The big thing for me that changed it for me was fighting about the election rigging. And you're probably thinking, oh, that's just a big lie that was put out in the election. Actually, if you check the dates, there were about how many hours of tape? There was actually hours and hours of tape from across the country that came out from Hillary's campaign, from coast to coast. We're talking Nevada, California, all the way to New York, of election commissioners, of poll workers, Democratic National Committee members, on tape, on camera, organizing union members, busing people across state lines, organizing the busing across state lines, talking about how they paid mentally ill people for the last 20 years to actually bust them for elections, for voter ID fraud, the amount of hours of tape that they got of election rigging for the last 20 years. For me, that was just, America just broke. And the thing is that it's easy to get that on the Republican Party if they would love to get that. The problem is that there's also been a huge investigation. There was a liberal that worked for Medium, and they really wanted to prove that the Republicans were doing this as well. So they went into the voter data and showed that the machines are being hacked by the Republicans too. And they went in, and I published this, you can find the link below in the video. And they went in and they did this whole study of all the data that's come up in the last, 20 years or whatever. And it showed that no, actually, the Republicans' data always came within the normal range of poll. There's supposed to be a range of polling, and how far, if it polls at this, there's a very specific poller that actually always gets it within a certain range, about 4 to 5 points. And the polling only comes out between 4 and 5 points. Not the polls that all the, mainstream media used, even Fox and stuff like that. And instead, Hillary's side was coming out 10 to 15 points different. And she did it to Bernie Sanders. Like, and it just showed this history. And they compared side by side, Republican versus Democrat. And the Democrats, and they were just like, I can't. And they're like, not that I'm going to vote Republican, but I can't vote Democrat anymore. Because they're just like, and that was happening in like, and so it's not just from one source, it's just from all these different sources of election rigging. And so, and it's not just that, it's also that they say they're not for the 1%. They say bring down the 1%, but the Democratic Party is the 1%. The 4 richest industries in America are tech, Wall Street, Hollywood, and the mainstream media. And all 4 of those industries, you may say business. No, business doesn't even break like the top 20. Like it doesn't even. Maybe the Koch brothers, but the Koch brothers are libertarian. And if you look at their background, they actually join with George Soros when it comes to outside things. And they want open borders. Find a conservative who wants open borders. And they want legalization of marijuana. They're big into the drug industry. Like, that's not a conservative position. And when you go, once you cross American borders, they join with George Soros on everything. So they're strictly libertarian. They're not considered conservative, not even by conservatives. The Koch brothers have all these open borders and legalization. They have all these things that are in line with George Soros. And George Soros is the #1 funder. $18 billion just this year for liberal, and he funds every mainstream, Van Jones and everything, like funds everything. Open Society, he funds you know how much he pays the mentally ill to do all the buses and all the marches? He has a listing up on his website. Every year they do a grant, $60,000 a year. They said the mentally challenged are urged to apply. And I've posted that. The receipts are up there. And when you start watching all the video, you'll start noticing sitting next to Linda Sarsour is someone who can't really speak. Sitting behind every one of these things in the row are all these people who are, unfortunately, it's a horrible thing to do. And the worst part is they're like, even if they need help will be provided. Do you think they're really providing the services for these mentally ill when they pack them onto buses and just ship them around? Because when you go to all these protests, they keep taking cameras and they follow all these protests. They're on these college campuses. It's not the college campus kids. They go and follow this stream of people and they follow it down the line. And then you go and you find a big row of buses. Even in Charlottesville, I've presented video to you guys of people in Charlottesville going, none of those people lived here. None of those people were us. Even the guy who hit the girl was from Ohio. It wasn't even us. Like, we live here. Who were those people? So it's, and then the guy who organized the whole thing ended up being an Obama guy, an Obama community organizer who also community organized Occupy Wall Street, which after the Soros leaks, it turned out that was the response to the Tea Party. They didn't want the Tea Party to succeed, so they put the IRS on them. So the Tea Party didn't get approval for any of their IRS things. It didn't get rubber stamped. So to distract from it, they did Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street wasn't even really homeless people. The average salary of an Occupy Wall Street guy was $50,000 and above, and they just funded them to go out there, and their job was to occupy. This is just unbelievable. And so all this research just keeps coming out and coming out and coming out. And then this top 4 industries is the 1%. And the 1% are all the donors. Amazon, top 10 billionaires. Top 10 billionaires in America. 8 of them are all DNC donors. Nancy Pelosi, the reason why she's so hailed on the top of Capitol Hill is because she's the #1 earner. In 1 quarter, at the beginning of 2018, she out-earned everyone on Capitol Hill in 1 quarter. And they were so proud of it at Politico and on Salon. And they were just like praising like how amazing she was at just raising all this money. And I'm just like, right, you guys are the champions of the poor, but she can go around and get money from all the elites. She went to Florida and she went to San Francisco. Meanwhile, San Francisco has so many needles on every corner and so much defecation going on in the public streets that it actually has a poop map. It is so unlivable. It has a poop map to help people avoid the poo in the city streets. If we are not becoming an actual society from the Hunger Games, where the elites live up here on Capitol Hill, and then their people are living in the crapper, And they're going around and collecting the money. Like even in Georgia, when Georgia race came up for the Democrat, do you want to know how the Georgia race went? The Democratic candidate didn't get money from the local community. They got money from New York and from LA and from San Francisco and $700,000 from Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is taxpayer money. Like I used to be right in the middle on abortion. I still am right in the middle on abortion. I'm like Supreme Court, right, abortion in the middle. Until I found out they're taking everyone's taxpayers' money. And I was just like, that's right, we're not provided free health care for anything else. Like, I would love to have all of my freaking back surgeries and everything paid for. And I'm just like, why is that one service? Why are our ovaries paid for and nothing else? You know, except that it really benefits all the white guys on Capitol Hill to have all their girlfriends taken care of. Like, what the heck? Like, I don't really get that. I don't, until you find out that most of the clinics are put in black communities. And then you find out the history of the Democratic Party and you find out that's right. They did that on purpose. They learned from Japan that it was actually used as a population mechanism. And they were like, great idea. We don't, you know what I mean? They started the KKK. And for some reason, the Democrats thought it was like, oh, we'll change the schooling. We put Abraham Lincoln, who was a Republican, they put Abraham Lincoln in their lobby of DNC headquarters for the visitor center. And then they're teaching in the school books right now that Abraham Lincoln was a Democrat. Even though the entire war was not North and South, it turns out that the entire war was Democrats versus Republicans. Did you know in New Hampshire, if you look at the maps of the Underground Railroad, did any of you actually notice that the Underground Railroad went to Canada? It didn't go from the South to the North. It went from America to Canada. The North was not safe. I started attending, because I started hearing this stuff, because of my research, I started going to the museums. Turns out I live near the Underground Railroad, so I started going. I started going to the museums, and I found out that they were murdering. If anyone was on the Underground Railroad in the North, they would hunt them down and murder them, and they would murder the white people who kept them in the basements. And I found out that New Hampshire had the president, Franklin Pierce, that campaigned against the abolition movement. That was New Hampshire. That's their legacy. That's the North. Franklin Pierce was from the North. And New Hampshire was torn apart like half and half. And the Underground Railroad went right through it. And it was like burning crosses on the lawn of New Hampshire because Franklin Pierce was so proud. And he led his people. And I just was like, what? Like, that's right from the North. That's not from the South. He was the president before Abraham Lincoln. It wasn't North versus South. It was Democrat versus Republican. And if you think that isn't going on today, then you should really see my inner city video. You should really look up the five identifiers of a plantation because they all match the inner cities of today. Exactly. And if you see, I worked the inner cities. I was a teacher in the inner cities, and I saw it firsthand. And let me tell you, none of the money reaches the students. They filter it out, they embezzle it, and they keep it in their own pockets. They love the inner cities. They rotate in and out, and they're like, okay, it's your turn next, now you embezzle. It's your turn next, now you embezzle. And they do hundreds of millions of dollars. So basically, we figured out that the Democrats were like, and that's not even including the laws that they're putting on the books. So in the Obama years, here's what we figured out. Here's what we figured out that the Democrat Party did in the Obama years, all right? We figured out that this is what the Democrats did in the Obama years. We figured out that Nancy Pelosi put a bill on the floor called UN 21. The United Nations passed a bill for world socialism in 1992. That's why the UN Watch was formed in 1993, because they saw it coming down. All right? So they passed a bill for that. Nancy Pelosi put it on the floor in 1993, and the House resounded. She said it's really rather simply, Lily, No, it wasn't. It was replacing our Constitution with socialism. And the House and the Senate turned it down. Everyone turned it down. And instead, Bill Clinton made it an executive order. What happened to our wealth? In that year, we used to have the 1% had wealth here, and the bottom 90% had wealth here. And when that year hit, that executive order was signed, the 1%'s wealth skyrocketed, and our wealth plummeted. And Bush just continued the same policies, because if we've learned anything on our research, it's that there's no difference between the GOP, the inside establishment, and the DNC. The DNC does all the work. They present all the bills. They present all the bills, they do all the work, they do all the laws, and then the GOP just lets it happen and doesn't get in the way. So right now, the Democrats, when they got into office with Obama for 8 years, they forwarded this assignment of the UN 21. So when they were under law, they ballooned the government. The government was this size. They ballooned the government to about that size. They ballooned the government by 3 times. They ballooned the government by number of people. I mean, they ballooned it times 3. They ballooned it by the number of people. They just ballooned it. And that was the DNC, because remember, the DNC, they had all 3 powers of government. And they just went crazy. Now, what's really interesting is they had a majority by 51 people. They had a majority by 51 people. Now, right now, the Republicans have a majority by 51 people. They're not willing to do anything. They just let all of this stand. They're not changing any of it. They just let it stand. They don't do a thing. They've done one thing. They did the tax cut. One thing. Everything else that's changed is because Trump did it. Trump did it by executive order. The moment Trump's gone, all of it goes back to this. All of it goes back to that. Most of this is still intact anyway, because the Republicans are not willing to do it. But when the DNC had 51, they would wait till December when everyone was on vacation, and then they'd pass bill after bill after bill every day, and they just skyrocketed the government. And when the government gets super huge, kind of like in China, where the government is huge and the people are small, corruption abounds. That is why the government is so, so powerful. And the people have a kid can't open a lemonade stand on a street without getting a ticket or a fine. You heard on that LeBron James thing about how he was, the CNN did the thing, and they were like, oh, the kid tried to open a thing and try to sell this on the street, and they called the cops on him. I was just like, no, that's the government that you guys encouraged. That happens to every kid. Brown, white, black, green. That's the government that you guys made because you love socialism. Because it benefits the rich. Socialism benefits the rich, just like Venezuela, just like everywhere. The rich get so wealthy off of socialism. Nazism, Nazi stands for Nazi, National Socialista. That stands for National Socialist Party. And if you look at it, if you do the 25 things that he outlined in it, if you take out exterminate the Jews, the other 24 things line up with the DNC party. Exactly. I'll put the link below. Exactly. And that is exactly what the DNC carried out. They carried out the Nazi party's agenda here. And made it real in our country. So, clean the GOP. That's why we're not cleaning the DNC. Because everyone working for it knows exactly what they're doing. So we know the DNC is out. They know who they're working for. They know what they're doing. All right? So now we know we're on to the RNC. So the RNC works for the establishment. A lot of them are leftists because they kind of think in terms of kings, like we're learning that. A lot of them didn't know what was going on. They had no idea. No idea. But they're not undoing Obamacare or anything like that because they're getting rich as heck off of the healthcare bill. Like Obamacare made a lot of people wealthy. The healthcare industry just boomed. It was so, so good for them, right? They didn't vote for it, but they all put in their little pieces of meat. All Obamacare was just a whole bunch of individual perks with each congressman made a deal with the healthcare industry deal. And each one of them got a payoff, right? That's why when POTUS says that he's undoing it piece by piece by piece, and even Newt Gingrich is like, oh, well, we'll get it undone piece by piece. They're undoing each piece that a senator does, and they just don't want to let go. Each one of them doesn't want to let go. And as every senator loses their seat or their seat runs out, then they're undoing it. That's not what we asked for or wanted. Like, we're getting raped with our money. Like, a third of my paycheck goes towards this medical industry. And it took me 9 years to get any better. Like, it's ridiculous. You know, they just want to put me on more and more meds. And by the way, those meds that they put me on, did you know that they made it illegal? The DNC passed a law that made it illegal for the pharmacy to tell me when I was paying more with my copay than it actually cost in cash. Like 60% of all of your prescription meds are actually cheaper if you pay cash than if you pay your copay. Remember when copays used to be $0 to $5? The DNC also passed a law that if your person that comes to your house, your contractor comes to your house and has insurance, the insurance company can still come after your house. So I had a nurse. It's a great excuse to do it, like, and oh gosh, I don't even have the words. So yeah, the DNC is great. Like, one party's totally bought by the UN. And so is the media, bought by the UN, because they've got the oil money and China's got all the riches from our $500 billion that are going there. They're the ones who have the wealth. And our business community, now that we have POTUS working for them, they actually stood up and said, wow, for the first time in 25 years, the DC doesn't hate us. The business community doesn't have any money. The top 20 richest families in America are all Democrat. You know, like, that's it. So we're left with the RNC, poor RNC. They are outspent 20 to 1. They have no money, right? They have no money. So we've got the RNC. So the people who are in RNC, a lot of them are kind of shills. Like, the DNC is like, well, we know that we can't win anymore. So Soros is funding a lot of them under the table. We have, for example, Lindsey Graham. Oh, Lindsey Graham. Who is he funded by? He is funded by Warren Buffett. You wonder why the Security Council doesn't get anything done or the Justice Council doesn't get anything done? It's headed by Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is funded by Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett. You want to talk about Warren Buffett? You know how I proved that 9/11 was pre-planned by showing the 10 years leading up to 9/11? I showed you 10 years. This happened, this happened. I showed you all the documentation. Boom, boom, boom. Warren Buffett started 9 years in advance a golf tournament on 9/11 with all his millionaire and billionaire buddies. And you know what it included? It included all the people on the floors of the World Trade Center, but only the CEOs. So that on the day of 9/11, on the day of the golf tournament, all of them happened to have their lives saved. So all the rich CEOs were there. And guess where that golf tournament was located? Offutt. Offutt, the first place George Bush flew. He left that schoolroom and flew to Offutt, where Warren Buffett was, and all the CEOs where the plane hit. And then they had the SEC wipe all the Wall Street transaction from that day. And then he never held that golf tournament again. He was like, that'll be our last golf tournament. And it wasn't just Wall Streeters that were there. It wasn't just businessmen. It was a bunch of celebrities, everything. And it was very interesting. It started 9 years before, right when they started. 9 years before was the first year they started actually doing like the pre-plan, like the first plan started happening, that NORAD started practicing for air, planes falling into buildings. You know, the ones that all Bush and everyone said, we could never imagine that, except that they had the NORAD training begin 9 years earlier. Right. So the RNC, the establishment ain't so great. There are some good RNC people, I'm sure, but, like Lindsey Graham funded by Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett funds only liberals, except for Lindsey Graham. Like, it's incredible to me. So, like, there's a lot of shills. And there's, like, some good boys that play really, really good, like, aw, shucks, and quote the Bible. But when it comes to voting, When it comes to voting, nowhere to be seen. They'll say everything good, but when it comes to voting, nowhere to be seen. And then, here's the thing we really discovered. They all say, you listen to every conservative commentator on the planet, and they'll be like, our party just doesn't know how to get together and do anything. They're just so scattered. They're just so useless and scattered. Well, I actually tracked their votes over the last year with POTUS. I tracked their votes. And they actually did a very ingenious thing, and you can see it right there in how they fooled us. No, they're not stupid. They are genius. They are expert politicians. And they did this genius thing that made sure they all did block voting so that they all had these 98% records of voting with POTUS. But they all block voted so that absolutely nothing passed except for the tax bill. So every executive order he signed, he put it on the floor and was like, here, I'm trying to undo UN 21. I'm trying to undo socialism, right? I'm trying to undo this. They refused to repeal it. So all this Obama stuff, all this 2/3 government, nope, they wouldn't repeal any of it. Nope, 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 nope. Getting too much money on the side. So that's it. The RNC establishment, they're just holding all of the Obama years and all the UN socialism that takes away your freedoms and puts it in the government's hand and not your hands. You don't have the freedom of speech, right? You don't have freedom to move around. The police, it's a police state, basically. If you watch China Uncensored, you'll find out how much we're like them. You know? They use Hollywood to do it. You wouldn't believe how much they use the police shows to do it. The police shows tell you, like, how they want you to act. And you forget, like, this, no, the Constitution actually gives us the right to do this. You know, like, they definitely make you think a woman can't defend herself. Like, she has to just stay there till he beats her to death. And her only thing that she can do is leave. Not defend herself. Heaven forbid she defend herself. No, that's a right given in our country, is that a woman has a right to defend herself. But across the nation, there actually states are putting into law that you don't have the right to stand your ground. That's communist. Across the board, they're passing communist laws at local levels with UN 21. It's a taxpayer-funded initiative caused by something called ICLEI. Look it up. ICLEI. Yeah. ICLEI. Sorry. ICLEI. I can't write. ICLIE. I see lie. Hey! I see a lie. Just think of it that way. ICLEI. I see a lie. It is. It's a big lie because it's funded by the UN. Funded by the UN. And it's a big, big lie. And they talk about community, and they have this one thing, the most local thing. They put a lot of articles in your local paper and your local free papers, and they say it's written by someone in the community, and it's not. It's actually written by somebody by the UN. If you watch the UN tapes, watch what these dictators say. All these dictators are actually wiping out and doing genocide everywhere. They're just genocidal maniacs, right? But they like own the UN. Like they just own the UN because they have so much money and power at this point, and they own our media. Like when you watch the UN sessions, you suddenly realize like, oh, they sound exactly like our media. That's who owns our media. That's why every time any of us talk to the media and you're like, why don't they sound like they're on America's side? They're not. They're on the UN side. They're on these dictatorship side. They own our media because the media is, it's called astroturfing. And the media, pretty much every segment you see on TV is a paid commercial. It's every slot is available for sale. And it's sold to a company or to an ad campaign or to a senator or whoever wants it. It's available for sale. And, you know, the most richest people out there right now are oil barons or China or whoever, and they buy it, and then they continue the narrative. So like the narrative of a really great person, Cheryl Atkinson, she did research. She wanted to find out, like, she followed the money. She saw this thing where everyone was saying it. She did the lie detector, the one that they do the lie count of POTUS. She actually tracked it, and she was like, well, they're doing the lie count, but they're not counting any other candidate's lies except for this one person candidate's lies. They're doing a lie meter for no other candidate but this candidate. That sounds like an ad campaign to me, so I'm going to look into it. And she traced it all the way back until this one foundation, and the foundation was owned by Google. So every time you hear Joy Behar say he lies, she's being paid by Google to say that. It's all astroturfing. It's all paid commercials now. Everything's just money, you know, because their viewership is down. Like their viewership's lower than Yogi Bear. Remember when Yogi Bear reruns came out and they looked at the viewer? They're not making money through viewership anymore. They need to make money another way. And that's how they make money nowadays. So anyway, back to the GOP. So we have the RNC, but we can't vote for any of the people because they're bought. What do we do? Right? And we don't have anyone honest running for the DNC. Like they're all socialist and communist and all their things. If you look at their things, when you say left, I already outlined what communism is. If you look at what left wants, they want restriction of freedom of speech. They have an elite class. They have this. It's all exactly what communism is. And no one wants to say communism, but the left is communism. That's exactly what communism is. So I'm like, nope, you're just a communist. And communism leads to 100 million deaths. We know that. Everyone's like, oh, it'll lead to bad people coming up. No, it leads to 100 million deaths. It leads to blood. I couldn't believe it. I heard Joe Rogan say, well, we'd rather have, you know, people extreme left than we would extreme right. And I was like, why? What has the extreme right led to? 0 deaths. 0 that I know of. Can you name an extreme right that's led to deaths? Don't tell me Nazi, National Socialist Party. So that's 6 million deaths right there on the socialist side, extreme left. Then there's Lenin, then there's China, who still has concentration camps, by the way. Should we keep on? Name me extreme right. You want to tell me KKK? Sorry, that was Democrat. So yeah, I'm sorry. I would rather, not that I want any extremes, but I really think I really don't think it's left versus right. I really think it's either freedom of man and liberty or domination by the state. It's one or the other. It's not left versus right. It's either freedom and liberty or domination by the state. This left versus right thing is a lie created by the left, by the communists. But either they want more government or they want more freedom for men. Now, that brings me to Clean the GOP. All the candidates who are running opposing the GOP establishment, if you look at them, if you go beyond incumbent means it's GOP establishment, they've already been with the GOP party, it's someone that's been there, or like the career politicians, some people are new, they're not an incumbent, but if you look at their record, well, they've been in state government they're running for Senate, but they've been in state government forever, and they have a great conservative rating. No, conservative ratings mean that they are, the money loves them. That means they're bought. No. What's happening is a whole range of people are suddenly emboldened, and they're all putting their names out there. And you'll notice that they all have something in common. They all have, let me scoot this over. They all want free speech. They all want preservation of the Constitution. And they don't want to be lied to. That's the other thing. They tell the truth. What I mean by tell the truth is they tell you what they really think. They don't talk like politicians. You'll really notice that when you start watching them. These people are like unabashedly just like, well, I think this, and I think this, and I think this, and I really think this. And they're open and they're honest and they're vulnerable and they have their phone numbers on their websites, but they all want the Constitution. They all want freedom of speech. And that's what happens because this is where we've come to, and I'll show you where we've come to. So this is where we've come to. In today's political climate, here's what you need to understand. If you're not with the left, this is what the media has done. And this is what the Democrats have done. They say if you're not a communist, if you don't believe that people should be persecuted for not believing like you, not thinking like you, not having, like you can't speak on a college campus if you have differing views than they do. You can be a free speech thinker. If a liberal went onto a New Hampshire thing, I'll have the video down below. New Hampshire's a mess, but I don't know why I keep mentioning New Hampshire today, but there's all these other places that are a mess too. But there's in a New Hampshire campus, a liberal came there, and Rubin Report, he is a liberal, and he went there and they shut him down, and all he was trying to advocate was free speech, and they shut him down. They're not for free speech, and they're for communist values. They're for Marxists. 75% of all literature and teaching in the arts today, in the arts side of colleges today, are Marxist. Is Marxist literature. And the media reflects that. And there's a reason for that, because the UN and the world's dictators, they lean socialist. They want this UN thing to go through. They want top-heavy government, where dictators of the world, those are socialist governments. You know, they don't want independent, free people, where the individual has the power. That's why they hate our vote. That's why they didn't talk about the primaries. So what happens is that they demand that you be communist in this little 10% of political views. You know, this is just 10% of all political views. Well, then there are liberal views, moderate views, and conservative views. Well, this is the other 90% of political views. And they are labeling all of us conservative. And what one of the speakers says is like, well, that actually goes back to the original definition of the word. And he says when Lincoln was around, conservative meant conserve the Constitution. And I was like, well, under that, yeah, I think all of us are conservatives. But the media doesn't define conservative that way. They define it as like pro-life, anti-gay. And none of that, I haven't heard a single conservatives. Well, I have heard one who's not, but he still talks with gay people and has them on his show all the time. He doesn't agree with it personally, but he doesn't impose it on other people. And that's the difference. Because Sharia does. Sharia wants to kill them. Sharia wants to impose their beliefs on others. You know, and in a free society, it's about live and let live. Your beliefs are yours. You know what I mean? So in these 90%, you know, if you think conservative, they label us, this is the media, this is the DNC, we've learned. You know, they have a communist way, and part of it is money and everything like that. So the rest of us are here. And so we're liberals, we're moderates, and conservatives. And the rest of us are coming to the realization that a lot of these liberals, moderates, and conservatives are starting to run, but they're not running Democratic, they're running GOP. And they used to run independent, but they saw that POTUS didn't run independent. In order to win, he went and ran GOP. So a lot of them you'll see they used to run independent, but now they're running GOP this year. So what we're getting on the GOP is we're getting a ton of independents, and we're getting a ton of people who run this range, and we're getting a whole range of them. And now the media is starting to find, now the media does not report accurate results at all. They report a reality, what they're paid to report. And so you will see results saying that a liberal won when they didn't. It happens all the time. But this last time on the 14th of August, they actually reported some real results. And I was like, why are they doing that? That's amazing. And then I was like, oh, they're reporting one of the guys that got through who's like a pro-lifer and and I was like, okay, you know, they want to scare everyone into being like, all these people coming up are all like that. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, but the people I have shared on my channel that run this gamut, I have had people like Sticks, who I love Sticks, and he grows vegetables in his gardens, but he's a punk rocker. He doesn't wear a shirt on his jacket. He wears a leather jacket, and he like does his tea or whatever, and then he grows things right. He's a total like liberal, and just he's great. He has long hair and everything like that, and he's kind of like, you know, you could almost imagine guitar in his hand or whatever. Like, you know, he would have been rock back in the day or something like, I guess, Six. I guess that explains it, right? And then all the way to Jesse Lee Peterson, who is just like so like, but he like speaks his mind and everything like that, but he doesn't make other people hold his beliefs. He has every kind of view on his show, every kind of view, every kind of view, but he has his beliefs. So we have preachers, and then we have people like Steve Wilson in Missouri, and he's like a total libertarian. He's got these big sideburns and everything. He actually looks like one of the founders. He's got red curly hair and all this stuff like this. And everyone in between, we have this whole mix, but we all believe in freedom of speech, freedom of expression, preservation of the Constitution. And what's really neat is that as all these people start coming out who don't look like politicians, who aren't bought, they're totally brave, as they come out, they look like each of their states. It's so neat because like, I think like Lively, who's coming up, Lively for governor, who's coming up in Massachusetts, he is so Massachusetts. Like Massachusetts, I'm sorry, I love you, Massachusetts, and everything like that, but Boston, like the media makes Boston seem so nice and charming, and they try to put this nice spin in. No, Boston ain't nice. Boston is not a nice people. Like, Boston is not a nice people. Boston, if you drive in Boston, I'll never forget the first time we drove in Boston, like when we did this road trip where we actually took our car. We actually took our car from California to the other side of the U.S. And everybody was like, California license plates? Like, what the heck? We took our car to the other side of the U.S. for this road trip, and we were in Boston, and our friend, because we have friends in like every city, because I do a lot of people, and so we were staying with a friend in Boston, and he was just, we were like, what the heck is wrong with Boston? Because they don't obey any of the traffic lights. They don't listen to any of the traffic lights, anything. You drive in Boston, and they would just sit on the hood of your car drinking coffee. And they're just like, that's just Boston. And I'm like, okay, they're just totally like, they're like that boxer. They're different. Now, I happen to think it's got its own charm, but boy, they romanticize it in movies. But no, there's like mafia, there's like ghetto, there's like everything. And they really don't show all the bad sides as well, because it's a liberal city, and it could be so wealthy, and they've got so many wealthies, and they steal from those poor people. They do so much, and they could make that city so it should not be poverty stricken anymore. And every year it gets more and more sick, and they hide things from the people all the time. It's disturbing, and it's so Democrat. And I've learned that from the history of the Democrats. It's exactly what they do. If you go to every liberal city, they say they're the richest in the world. Yeah, well, they're also the poorest. Every rich Democrat city has a ghetto in it. Haven't you noticed that? But you go to the Republican cities, where's the ghettos? You know, like there's a few crack houses maybe, like, yeah. Oh, it's frustrating, like, because it's just hidden. And I've just figured something out about the hospitals. I'll have to share that with you. So it's frustrating because they just feed off of them. And now they're starting to try and put gambling in. And I'm just like, thanks. What a way to take more money. You know, just pump that government assistance money in them so you can just get it out again through gambling and everything else. Just try and cycle it all out. It's just predatory. It's so predatory. And then go out and live on your Cape Street. Go out and live on your Cape. That's real nice. You know, just stay aloof in a way and be so proud of yourself that you're so wealthy, you know, and and they do all their charity work, but they don't give any of that money to the ghetto. Nope. Where does their charity money go? Where does the DNC, where does all that Microsoft charity money go? Where does it go? It goes to the Democrat Party. It goes to the Southern Poverty Law Center that goes around and gets all of the conservatives to lose their bank accounts. It persecutes conservatives. Just if you're a conservative and you own a business, good luck. You can't be a conservative in this country and be political in any way, because you will have your business ended. Amazon won't do it. Amazon, you try to be a smile thing on Amazon and they'll limit it. The only reason they do Prager is because they get so much money. I still can't believe Prager actually has a smile thing with Amazon, because Amazon's the #1 funder of DNC things. It's like the #1 funder of communism. And I'm just like, and Amazon's just basically China. I'm getting into too much. Like, I think Jeff Bezos just a front at this point with all the research we've done. Like, everyone's like, oh, Walmart does so much with China. I'm like, Amazon does way more. Like, Amazon, where are the manufacturing that goes into, what is Amazon? It's just a big warehouse. Everything goes straight from China into Amazon and then ships out. And if you have a product that's doing well on Amazon, Amazon just gives it to China. They remanufacture it. They give it a better rating. They downrank your stars and then they make it smaller so that every time, I saw it all the time on the beauty community, there would be this amazing new product made in America and it'd sell off the shelves, and then suddenly Amazon would present a new product, and they'd push it, and all of a sudden the original product would just die every single time. And then I saw Peter Navarro's, who is a Democrat, thank you very much. So I don't know if he's going to be a Democrat very longer, but he's working in the POTUS White House. But Peter Navarro went ahead, well, no, he did do a very shady Democrat thing. He did Made in China, and he only named Walmart. He didn't name eBay. He didn't name Amazon, check out how much Amazon sells in comparison to eBay. And every time we do a trade deal or something like that, or put tariffs, Amazon undercuts it. Like the amount, and if you look at the matrix that Peter Navarro put out of the 50 trading practices, the 50 illegal international trading practices that China does, go ahead and look at all the documentaries that have been done on Amazon. Amazon does all 50 of them wherever they go in their warehouses. Every single one. And I was like, interesting that he did the matrix in the colors of Amazon. I was like, is that his way for saying, sorry, I didn't do Amazon? I mean, Amazon started selling at the same time the World Trade Organization started, eBay too. Those two take way more money than Walmart does. At least Walmart puts an actual store in our place so taxes go to us. Not Amazon, not eBay. They ship straight to us and they cut all taxes out of the local government. I couldn't believe they did that. So anyway, I was just like, thank you. I'm sure I was just like, why is Netflix actually distributing? Why is this actually being distributed? Something against China? Why are all these liberal people? And I was like, oh, because it goes after the one surviving conservative company left, Walmart. But you'll notice Walmart is not in those top 10 billionaires. And if you look at Theranos, you know that big Theranos, basically it was a shell game. If it was, Theranos is absolutely no different. There was no way it could have worked. Anyone who knows anything knows it couldn't have worked. Started by the Clinton Foundation. Did you notice that all the investors were conservative? Betsy DeVos, Walgreens, all conservative investors. They put people on the board, but they didn't invest. All conservative investors, and then they tanked it. They tanked it the moment POTUS got in office because an investigation would have been started, and they all lost their shirts. It's just a Ponzi scheme. Like if you go back through history in Wall Street, they have just been systematically. There's actually a documentary on how they've just been targeting conservatives. That's the opposing party. Like that is communist China. Communist China has labor camps and political targeting on anyone who is against their political thing. And that is what the Democrats have been doing. So we have been putting in people who are brave enough to stand up to it, who just don't give and they're brave enough. And so what we're doing in Clean the GOP is we are going there and we're saying, yeah, we're going to put our vote behind you, not behind the paid people anymore. We don't care because the DNC is communist and the RNC is just like, we won't vote yes or no. We just won't vote at all. We're just going to let all your bills pass and we're going to let it sit there and we're just going to be inactive. And we'll do one tax bill to make us look good so we can stay in office. They did one bill that was 2018, the year of their elections. And then it's up for vote again afterwards. They don't have to vote for it again. We have no guarantees. They just did it for their year of vote to say we did something. You think they're really going to do something? So we're putting in people who are going to do something because these people can have Linda Sarsour swarm their hallways and they're not going to care. You know why they're not going to care? Because they've lived it. Every single one of us have lived it. We're real people who have had to live this. One of the guys that I listed up in Oregon, or was it Washington? His family came from the gulags in Russia. You think she's going to intimidate him? No. And the more and more I look at these candidates, and Lively, who's just like, they're all different. Some are religious and some aren't, and there's a whole variety. But you know what they're like? They remind me of the revolutionaries. They remind me of the Revolutionary War. And you never forget that the Revolutionary War had 13 different colonies, and every single one was hella different. Don't you forget that. Don't you forget that we were really, really different and we had to come together in order to be free. And don't you forget that we had to come together against a government of elites, rich, snobby, British elites who thought they were better than us. And don't you think if you watch the movies of the American Revolution, notice they don't make movies about us fighting anymore. Notice they don't make movies. Notice Hollywood doesn't make movie about Americans who fought for freedom anymore. Hasn't been done since the year 2000. Why do you think that is? When I was growing up, there was a movie every other year. Nevermore. Notice that all the diversity has disappeared in Hollywood. When they eliminated all the conservatives in Hollywood, boom, all the diversity disappeared. I grew up when there was 8 years of a black family was the #1 show in America. I didn't, you know what I mean? Like, I still have to, I have to have other conservative commentators be like, oh, there goes another black person. And I'm just like, oh, right, they're black. You know what I mean? Like, because I grew up with a show that, like, they didn't call them that. They didn't say America's #1 black family. It was just the #1 show in America. And they had, like, The Bodyguard, the #1 movie in America. It just wasn't, you know, they were casting people in movies and they weren't asking for a colored person in this movie. Identity politics happens in a communist country, in Marxism, and it leads to hundreds of millions of deaths. And by the way, Islam's the only one that causes more. They wiped out 270 million people in their history, and it's only been more in the last few years. They just keep it coming. And I published a ton of research, like Sunday of August 12th, I think it was. Ton of research that I found out. There are 2 books in Islam. One is peaceful, and then when no one gathered for 12 years, he was like, all right, I'll get political. He's like, kill all the Jews and kill all the Christians. And that's really tempting, isn't it, to be more powerful than another person? And people came flooding. They came flooding. Did you know 60% of all verses in Islam are about how to treat others that are non-believers? That's it. Islam is so power hungry, because it tells people, here's how you treat people who are not like you. It doesn't have human rights in Islam. There are no Christians left in the Middle East. There are no Jews left in the Middle East. They all had to flee to Jerusalem. They all had to flee to America because they're still being ripped apart, killed, slaughtered. No one talks about that because the UN is owned by those dictators. They have that oil money. So the next time you get pissed that America is actually getting some own resources by drilling, why do you think that is? Do you want to be beholden to people who are slaughtering you for your beliefs? And now they're here. The last research they did by an imam here in America, 80% of mosques are preaching jihad against us. That's the slaughtering of non-believers. You know who else is doing that? Linda Sarsour, the co-founder of the Women's March. So we're cleaning the GOP, and we're getting people in who are brave, because we want the one piece of paper in the entire world that gives men the ability to be free. The only one that exists on the planet. We want it to survive. So we're voting for them. And you can join us or not. That's the power of the vote. It's your choice. And the rest of us are becoming poll workers, and we're guarding the polls. We're guarding the USB ports that they've put into the back of the poll machines. And we're protecting it from their materials, advertising their own people, breaking the laws. And we're staying with the poll talliers until a day, 2, or 3 later when they want to change the tallies. We're fighting back because it's our vote, not theirs. It's the last thing we have, and we're going to keep it. That's Clean the GOP. Peace out. See you on the next one. Bye. You can check out these 2 videos. Clean the GOP. That was my original one before I knew about the tactics that the GOP was using, and that's on this one. That tells you all about the tactics, and I hope that helps. And there are primary updates in my election info playlist. Bye, guys.